I would like to take a moment before we get into today's main episode and to talk about my sponsor for the podcast. Podmatch is a new podcasting site dedicated to all podcasters. The platform helps hosts get connected with potential guests to appear on their show, as well as allow guests to find podcasts that will give them a chance to share their story. Podmatch offers many tools to help organize your page, from to-do lists to episode planning to potentially appearing on a leaderboard. Podmatch has it all. The best part, you have the potential to get paid. And who doesn't like to get paid from home? I like to. With an easy sign up, you can start connecting with podcasters and guests immediately. I have been a part of Podmatch since the beginning of May, and I have got to say that it was the best decision I've ever made because Podmatch helps your podcast grow. It helps you get connected with people that have very interesting, very compelling background stories that are just waiting for their story to be shared. So if you are a host or guest and would like to start building professional relationships, explore more opportunities, and have your story shared, I highly suggest that you sign up with Podmatch today by going to joinpodmatch.com/lethal venom to start expanding your network in seconds. I would like to give another huge thank you to Podmatch for sponsoring this episode. Now on to our main episode, and again, you can sign up at joinpodmatch.com/lethal venom to begin your podcasting journey today. Hello everyone, welcome to the Lethal Venom Podcast. This is a show where I talk about anything I want with the honest to God truth, no lies told. Today I'm joined by Mr. Robert DeLana. He is going to be joining us today, telling us a little bit about his story. He was raised in Revere, Massachusetts, and is a graduate of the Governor's Academy, Trinity College, and Northeastern University School of Law. He lives currently in Sandbury, Massachusetts with his wife, Mary Beth, and his daughter. And then in 2023, Rob and his son Ryan published Without Restraint, chronicling Ryan's journey through several therapeutic schools after a diagnosis of pervasive developmental disorder and how an impromptu ski day changed their lives. So I would give the whole floor and would like to welcome Robert to the show. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks, Noah. Thanks for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to tell my story.
So if you could just tell me a little bit more about yourself and what a little bit more about your background.
So I was, I guess, a blue collar kid. Revere, if you know Massachusetts at all, was right near the airport, kind of a blue collar town. And my wife was from a similar town, I would say, in outside of Philadelphia. And we kind of came up the hard way, and we were fairly successful in our academic careers, which led to, promising professional careers. We moved out to the suburbs, and we were sort of living the American dream, I guess. And had our first child was my son Ryan, baby number one comes along, and at first blush he was perfect. He was beautiful. He was smart. He was energetic. He was a fun kid to parent, but he could be difficult. He was volatile at times. If he didn't get his way, he never stopped moving. And when he got to preschool, it became evident that he was going to be a problem because on day one they asked us to stay after school and to talk about what the issues were, and that quickly led to a recommendation of pulling him out of the public system and putting him in a therapeutic school. And these therapeutic schools, were there were parts we liked about it because it was smaller classes and it was a little more individualized to each kid. But at those therapeutic schools, they were allowed to put their hands on the kids. They were allowed to restrain them and hold them if they got dysregulated, which, just to advance the story, was a disaster. And Ryan was restrained multiple times a day. They taught us how to restrain him at home. They advised us to hire a special needs nanny trained in how to restrain kids. And his life was really terrible for a long period of time, and we were sort of following along with this program. We live in this area with all these great hospitals and doctors, and everybody seemed to be Harvard trained and telling us this was the only way, and if we didn't follow this path, he would end up dead or in jail, and we needed to sort of get him, rein him in. And so our life all of a sudden went from perfect to really off the rails. And, we had another child who was in the mix too, a daughter, and things were pretty bad. And I used to try to just take Ryan on these little expeditions and, keep him out of the house as much as possible, keep him busy, keep him happy. And we used to walk around Boston. He loved like HVAC systems, like big air conditioning and fans and, construction sites. And we would go stand there and at Home Depot. And we spent a lot of hours doing that. And this one particular cold day, and in the winter here is a long, and there's a lot of snow, and I hadn't skied in 25 years. I wasn't a skier, but we had driven by this little ski hill near our house, and I just decided to go there one day. I had no idea why, and I that day I just saw a different kid, and Ryan's life changed that day, and my life changed that day.
So, explain the process of his diagnosis and the journey it took from him being diagnosed to finally getting the final word about what was wrong.
That's a great question, and and no one's ever asked that question. But there's kind of a dance, like a picture when when you have something wrong with you and you go to the doctor, your doctor tells you what's wrong, but then your doctor needs to code it right for the insurance company. And then we don't code it this way, they won't cover it. It's a little bit like that. So Ryan has these issues in school. They send us to a neuropsychologist who observes him. And her immediate diagnosis was that Ryan was really smart in the left half of his brain and weak in the right half of his brain. And if you think about it, my wife and I were these type A people. We were very rigid people. We're not creative, we're not artsy. It made a lot of sense. Obviously, that's not a diagnosis. When she did follow up with some testing, she did some educational testing, which Ryan would score really highly in some parts and lower on sort of the social emotional parts. She had to put a formal diagnosis together. And the way she described it to us, it really didn't matter what she called it as long as she called it something, because then the town would pay to send them to these private schools and they would pay for all of these services. At the time, now this is now 2004 roughly, there was really autism, or you were either autistic or you weren't. And it was clear Ryan wasn't autistic. The spectrum was just starting to come out and be discussed, but it really hadn't formalized yet. And so at the time, the diagnosis she gave us was called Pervasive Developmental Disorder, not otherwise specified, PDD-NOS. You still see it a little bit nowadays. And it's funny, as I've been on this journey and I've met parents from all walks of life, people reach out, when they read the book, and they'll talk about their kid, and there'll be nothing like Ryan, totally different kid. And I'll say, well, what's your son's diagnosis? Oh, PDD-NOS. I'm like, how's that possible? And so, because PDD-NOS was just this bucket category, when they couldn't really call it something concrete, they would just lump you in this bucket. And every other town was doing the same thing. They needed to do it to justify the payment for services. And so, in a rich town like ours, there was no fight at all. Once we had a diagnosis, we got whatever we wanted. That ended up being not just a mixed blessing. It was the worst. It was a curse, really, because of all of these services we got. Ryan was at these terrible schools. Had we been in a more blue collar town, they would have fought us on that diagnosis and probably said, you know what, he's a little hard. He doesn't listen, but we're going to deal with it. Don't worry, we're going to keep him in public school. So it was one of those be careful what you wish for moments, I think, Noah, that we got what we wanted, and then as a result, that diagnosis, he was really stuck with it for the rest of his, I wouldn't say his life, but at least for the next 10 years.
Did you have any regrets following the advice doctors and educators had given you about Ryan when he was young?
Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of regret. I mean, every time I do one of these podcasts, I end up tearing up. I mean, it's just something I can't seem to get over, because I think what bothers me most is I'm a guy that I follow my gut. I got this way in life, because I just trust my instincts, and everything was screaming, "Don't, this is wrong. Don't do this." But you know what? You walk into that office. I'm not a doctor. They'd have a Harvard diploma on their wall. They knew more than I did, and you saw, all right, well, I'm going to defer to them. They must know more about how to manage kids. But the lesson, that I always tell people whether they read the book or not, you know your child better than anybody. You just do, and whether it's instinctive or genetic or whatever, you just know. The fact of the matter is, you just spend more time with he or she. You go to these appointments and you meet with the doctor for 15 minutes, and they give you their diagnosis, you walk out the door and someone else walks in. I mean, it's they don't have time to really, to live it like you're living it. So I have a ton of guilt about just following it initially. The biggest guilt, there's two major pieces of guilt, I think. One, allowing somebody to put their hands on your child and giving them the green light to do that was something I never should have done. It was crazy. I wasn't raised in a house where I was hit. I mean, and I grew up in that era where parents did hit kids, and it just, that's what restraint is in a lot of ways. It's putting somebody in an uncomfortable physical position so that they won't do whatever they did wrong the next time. And but what I realized when we did it at home, Ryan would get in trouble for something, and we were supposed to put him in timeout. And if he refused the timeout, or there was, he was acting, with where safety was at stake, we were supposed to restrain him. That would lead to this half-hour long wrestling match on the kitchen floor. And then at the end of that, he'd be crying, I'd be sweating, and neither of us could remember why it started to begin with. And so I had the chance to live it and say, this is just wrong. It's just crazy to do this. This is not helping. And I let it go on, even, longer than that, because once he was in a therapeutic school, our town wouldn't take him back. They wouldn't let him go back to public school. So we were left with this, well, if we pull him out, we might have to homeschool him. We're not really set up for that. And we both work, and what do we do? And in the end, I should have followed my instincts the second time and just pulled him out. The last piece that I'll just say on instinctively, you know, Ryan was on a lot of medication, as he got older, especially they put him on tons of meds. And, again, I just felt like he was too young to be medicated at the level he was at. They would switch meds at the drop of a hat. If something wasn't working, they would change the dose. I never really bought in. And that's not to say I'm anti-medication. I think medication helps people, it saves people. There's times when it's the only thing you can do. Ryan really wasn't at that point. And I think I allowed that a little too easily too, because I was hoping for this magic pill that was going to save everything, solve everything. And there is no magic pill. There's no magic pill to life. There's no magic pill to parenthood. You've got to really, look at your kid and say, is this medicine, this thing worth the side effects that I'm seeing? Are we getting a benefit that justifies weight gain, cholesterol, high blood pressure? I mean, things that really impact not just your quality of life, but your ability to live beyond 30, 40 years old. I mean, and he was on meds like that. And that was a big mistake. So I have a lot of guilt about that too. So long answer to a short question, but a lot of regret.
From your a little bit more about your bio, it says back in 2010 he was voluntarily committed to a mental hospital for further evaluation. Did the mental hospital help anything, or did it presumably make things worse?
Yeah, that was the
I've
worst
only
thing we ever
heard,
did. Yeah, no,
because I've heard mental hospital does worse things. So, what was that experience like? Just from,
it was horrible, you have good instincts for picking that out. I think it was in the book I described the three mistakes. I sort of just went into the first two. The mental hospital was the third biggie, and it was probably the worst of all. It was presented to us when Ryan, we were trying to find a medication that worked. And I had just pulled him out of the first therapeutic school, and we didn't have a second school, so he was home all day. And he was just bored, and he was getting in a lot of trouble, and his therapist was hearing about this. And so and now his sister is 15 months younger. And so the therapist would always, so that tease us a little bit, not tease, but tease out the scenario where Ryan would do something where his sister would get badly hurt. That was always the leverage that she had. So she convinced us that if we put him in this mental hospital, it was one where the parents were allowed to stay. They could adjust his meds in an environment where they could see the side effects in real time. If anything happened, they would be able to make a switch. And so it was plausible. We're like, all right, I guess that makes some sense. But as soon as we got there, it was a voluntary commitment, but we realized, one, it was a big mistake, and two, they had a lot of leverage, because once you voluntarily commit yourself, if they feel like if you could leave, but if you leave and they disagree with you wanting to leave, they can push for an involuntary commitment. And they floated that idea with Ryan, that we, after a couple of days, we said, this isn't working out. We want to get out of here. And she was pretty, clear that if we did walk out the door, she may, petition the state to commit him involuntarily. At that point, you have no leverage. You have no right to remove him, really. So she had the right to keep him while they adjusted these meds. Now, Ryan at the time was on a medicine called Lamictal. Lamictal is still used today. It's widely used in mental health stuff. I think it was used originally for blood pressure. It makes you relaxed, but there's a side effect that affects a small segment of people. They get this side effect called Stevens-Johnson syndrome, which is this blistering all over your body, which can be fatal. And it starts as a rash, and it ends up with these like painful blisters all over you. And the way they were combating the risk of that was to kind of really titrate the dose up very slowly over time. this doctor at the hospital wanted to quadruple his dose the second he got there. And my wife was in biotech and she was a lawyer, but she knows a lot about, side effects of medicine. That's kind of what she does as a biotech lawyer. And she kept questioning, why are you raising this so quickly? And as it turns out, if we didn't have much say because we really wanted to get him out of there, and they raised the dose. We finally get him out of there. Ryan and I went on a ski trip the second we got out of there. It was Thanksgiving Day. And on the plane ride back, he told me his legs were itchy. And we just come from Utah. Utah is like a desert, it's very dry. I said, you probably just dry skin. And he raised up his pant leg and he had these bumps all up and down his leg. And now this is like pre-Wi-Fi on planes, and we're about to take off, and I'm like trying to get the doctor on the phone, and she just sent me back a message that said stop taking the medicine immediately, but she didn't say anything else. So now I'm sitting on the plane, and I'm wondering, is he going to have this side effect? Should I stop the plane? Should I get off? And we're like taxiing down the runway, and I was like, all right, I'm just going to roll the dice. I think she would have said get off the plane and go to the ER if it was that dire. But as it turns out, we were able to get him off the meds and he didn't suffer the really bad side effect. But it was the beginnings of that side effect. We just caught it early, thank God. The hospital stay at the end of the day did nothing. We all that pain and trauma and really, I think to this day he still feels that of really being locked in a place where you couldn't leave. He tried to escape twice while he was there. He dove through the window where they used to feed the meds at night. He dove through it, and it led to this like series of offices, and they had to track him down. So he was 9 years old. I mean, he really wanted out. All of that was for a medicine that we ended up taking him off as soon as we could because of the side effects. So it accomplished absolutely nothing. It was just filled with trauma. Now, while we were there, I mean, I will say, of the people we saw there, I saw a lot of kids who were this is in the city. There was a lot of inner city kids who had clearly been kicked out of public school or were kicked out of their foster homes, or they had no homes and they didn't know what to do with them. So they would stick them in there. They did not have mental problems. The state just didn't know what to do with them. There was a small segment of the population, a couple of kids that to me seemed like they had severe mental issues and were probably looking at a lifetime of places like that. I mean, and I don't know any of their backstory. I mean, I don't know how they got there, why they got there, but there were kids I think that probably needed to be in a place like that. And then the rest were just like Ryan. I think that people think that they're going to go there and it's going to be like, casting a broken leg, or, it's not with your brain and your mind and your emotions. Locking someone in a room, it's not going to help them. It might keep them from doing something worse if they're pre-suicidal or suicidal, or they might, murder somebody. But you're not gonna walk out of there and say, okay, I'm better. So for us, it was a big mistake, and I wish we never did it.
So, after all that, you kind of have learned and figured out that skiing has really helped. Tell me about the first time you took Ryan skiing.
Yeah, so we're having this day at home. It's Christmas break, and he's fighting his sister. And I was reflexively, I always would throw him in the car and just take him somewhere. And I still don't know why I drove to this little ski hill. We didn't have any equipment. I think I maybe grabbed a bicycle helmet. I mean, we didn't have, he had gloves and a coat on, and I probably did too. But we were not dressed for skiing. And we go to this little hill. Now, everything we ever tried before in terms of, I mean, I was an athlete in college. My wife was too. I tried every sport with Ryan known to mankind. It would always end in tears. He couldn't accept any failure. Like, so anytime it didn't go well right off the start, he would unravel and would end up giving up. So I figured skiing was probably going to be like that. We would get out there, would get the equipment on, he would fall, and then I'd be in the car coming home. And or we wouldn't even get through the rental process because it would take too long and he would get frustrated. And so I didn't have any expectations. I just wanted to drive the half hour there, and I knew it was a half hour home, and if we lasted there a half hour, then I just killed 90 minutes. So we get there, and I don't know, there was something about it that intrigued him. I think we got through the rental process without too much drama. And I don't know if you've ever skied, but one of the things they call a magic carpet, like picture this like airport people mover, the thing that moves through the airport that you stand on. They have
Mhm.
those on the little hill. So you get on that and it takes you up 30 feet basically, and you step off and ski. And all of a sudden we were on that, and I was like, wow, like I didn't think we'd get this far. And we get to the top of that, and I pushed him into the snow, and I looked at him, and I tried to I had skied as a little kid, so I tried to explain to him how to stop and how to turn, and none of my advice was technically correct. I didn't know what the hell I was talking about. But he just looked at me, and he ignored me, and he shot right down to the bottom without making a turn. He just went straight all the way down to the bottom. And nobody does that on their first day. And I remember thinking, how did he know what to do? How did he do that? And then I sort of fumbled my way down, and he had already cut the line, and I had to move him to the back of the line. Right, I know you have to wait in line, and I don't know, we just had a pretty good day, and it was better than anything we'd ever done. I mean, we lasted there for probably 2 or 3 hours. My wife was calling, wondering where we were because she never thought we'd last. And we went back the next day, and I got him a lesson, and he was pretty good at it. And he just, I don't know, he loved the adventure of it. He loved the outdoors. He loved, there were different trails. Ryan was sort of an acquirer of facts, and there's a color coding system with skiing. There's black diamonds are the hardest, and blue squares are middle, and or green circles are easiest. And he loved that sort of, trying to figure out how to get to the next level. And he did the black diamond on his, I think it was first day or second day. And we went to a bigger mountain in Massachusetts the next weekend, and then the weekend after that we were in New Hampshire, and then we were in Vermont, and then next thing I knew I was in Colorado, and it kept building from there, and every place was a new challenge and a new experience. And skiing is a great sport because a lot of you can't have your phone out, you're cold, your gloves are on, and it's a lot of time on the chairlifts too. Like, so we would have a lot of time together just sitting there and talking, and I just saw him in a different light. I saw this different kid. I saw a kid who was finally allowed to take risks, and I wasn't behind him saying, "No, Ryan, get down. No, Ryan, you can't do that." Or Ryan, everybody's looking. Or Ryan, apologizing to everybody around him at the pool or wherever. He was people clapped when he did things. People applauded him when he took risks, or he jumped off of something, or he went in the trees, and he just started to thrive, I think. And it became the one place we could go where he was at peace. And I sort of justified everything else that was going on in his life, and all the trouble he was having at school, and all the trauma we were having at home, because it was offset by those moments where at least he was happy while we were skiing. What I came to realize, and is that was the real Ryan. That if I just had allowed him to be that person at home and at school, I would have had that kid all the time. It just took me skiing to see it, and it's. I hope that makes sense. It's a little counterintuitive, but it was just seeing somebody thrive and be free, I think, and realizing who they really were.
And it makes it to where it takes a lot of the stress about as a parent off all the thoughts that you're thinking about they all kind of go away. I just know if I went skiing, I'd be in the hospital. I just know that would be me
It's
because
definitely it's not easy to learn. It really isn't. Uh,
I've never been. I'm from like deep south here, and it rarely snows, and we don't even have enough snow to where we could do skiing. So anything. So after you took Ryan skiing for the first time, what changes did you see after his first time?
I'd say he had this. He had these moments where he wasn't the bad kid in the room anymore, and I think that was a confidence builder. He also it opened up this whole world of geography for him, and places to aspire to see and go. And he was able to do a lot of research, and Ryan's like encyclopedic with his knowledge of things. So he would learn about these other mountains, and this other mountain has this trail, or this place has this thing, and this 60 degrees, and this one's 45 degrees, and nobody ever skis this. And it just gave him a focus point, I think, to say, all right, like I described him, I think he was probably feeling his own way. Like, all right, my life stinks, school's awful, home isn't that great either. But at least I have this thing on Saturdays I can go and do that is awesome. And I'll get through those other 6 days if I can get to that Saturday skiing day. And so I think it just gave him hope. And then the more and more we did it, and the more we traveled, and it allowed me to see him in a different light so that I could question everything that was going on. I started to fight these schools, and my wife and I together were fighting these schools, and it allowed us to question the medication decision, and it allowed us to really question the way we parented him. That he was much better than me, and I was a grown man, and he was responsible for me when he was 9 or 10 years old when we went skiing. I never learned the names of any trails. I'm like the guy who won't ask for directions. I didn't know where I was going most of the time. I couldn't ski that well, and he was taking me to these really extreme trails because that's what he wanted to do. So I was life or death every minute. And he, in a lot of ways, he was responsible for my safety. And he was proving himself day in and day out. Whenever we did get separated, he would make good decisions. He would ask for help. And I'm saying he's at a school where they won't let him go to the water fountain without a chaperone. But yet here we are in Utah. I mean, if he got lost out here in the back, he'd die. I mean, there's real consequence in some of these places, and yet he makes good decisions. And I think it changed everything. It really just changed his opinion of himself, and it really changed my opinion of him. And I hate to admit that, but I think when you have a kid who's got issues, you just see this limited view and say, okay, what's the best case scenario? All right, he'll probably live with us for the rest of his life. Maybe he'll get a job, and maybe he'll be able to have some independence. And I look at him now, he lives in a van, he's with his girlfriend, he's traveling around, he's a rock climbing guide. I mean, these people show up at this rock climbing became something he started to do after he skied. And they hand over their 8 and 10-year-old kids for a week-long camp to Ryan, and Ryan's in charge of them. And it's like, it makes me laugh now that here's a kid that we didn't think was going to be responsible for himself, and now he's responsible for the safety of a bunch of other people. So it did change everything. I'm glad we found it. I think if it wasn't for skiing, we would have found something. I'd like to think I would have eventually landed on something where I would have seen the real Ryan, but I don't know. I mean, it was the perfect, I think, place because it was so free and open, and he was able to take risks.
During this change in since then, have any past doctors or past educators approached you saying how much have they seen a change in how Ryan acts now, or have you had any kind of sympathy from them? Because obviously they didn't treat him well when he was young, and now that he's thriving, he's doing really well. I mean, it's now getting to where he can actually take care of kids for fun activities. Have they reached out and have given their appreciation for it, or have you just not, have they just not said
We've never
anything?
heard from it. I wondered, and it's a great question because I did, when we wrote the book, we changed everybody's name, we changed the school names, we changed the doctor's names. But, it's a pretty small community. And I think, I tried to be really fair, even to the schools where we had a lot of difficulties. Um, you know, they were following their protocol, and we willingly walked into that school and put Ryan, and we knew the protocol, and when my argument with the school was once we realized it wasn't working, and I said to them, "Why don't you try something else?" They just refused to try something else. They only knew their own way. But there's a lot of life like that. Of the three doctors he saw the most, the first doctor who diagnosed him, I don't begrudge her because I think at the time he was 4 years old. He was difficult for schools, and like I described, she really was looking for a pathway for us to get services. So I think she was a little creative with her diagnosis, and she felt like that was probably served him best. The second psychiatrist, that put him on a lot of medication, I think, she was new, she was younger, she was worried he was gonna, jump off the roof or run out into traffic, or I think she was so scared to make a mistake that she overdid it. And it wasn't until we got to a third psychiatrist who, he just was different in his approach. And right from the get-go, when he met with us, he looked at Ryan's medication and said, "Is Ryan bipolar?" And we'd heard that here or there, but he'd never been diagnosed. And so we said no. And he said, "Well, why are you medicating him like he's bipolar then?" And we couldn't really explain it because, you start with one medicine and then you get to two and then you're at three, and just little increments, kind of the dosages got a little, more, a little bigger, and it just kind of happened. And he really made us look at it and say, the side effects of this medicine are X, Y, and Z. The side effects of this medicine are X, Y, and Z. All of that adds up to a really short life for him because of the physical consequences. If he didn't take these medicines, would he die tomorrow? And No, I don't think so. And I don't, and so he was able to make us really look at it and say, you got to justify each one of these and realize the consequences, in terms of the side effects. So he stayed in Ryan's life the longest and really saw Ryan, I think, at the end when Ryan was thriving. So, you know, I think he was the reason for a lot of the good things that happened. The previous two, I have a feeling if they haven't read the book, they've heard about the book. And again, I try to be fair. I don't think they did a bad job in terms of what psychiatrists are supposed to do. But I think they'd have to look at it now, looking where Ryan is, and question if 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 they were wrong from the start, and if they are, I mean, they're not gods. They're human, right? It's not like a broken leg, right? A cleanly fractured broken leg. It's a 4-year-old's mental and emotional state, which that can change daily, minute by minute. I mean, so I think it's a really unfair thing, I think, to judge them too critically, but I try to look at the whole profession, and I think, when you look at the number of kids that are on medications, the number of kids who are seeing therapists, and maybe it's time to look at that and say, maybe we got to let these kids be kids a little bit, and before we start, trying to change them and fix them. And I was as guilty of that as any. When he wasn't perfect and he wasn't the star of the class and he wasn't able to play sports and be on a team, and you dangle that pill or dangle this therapeutic intervention and it's gonna fix him. Sure, all right, let's try that. But that's something I've learned to live with and realize my own shortcomings and wanting to do that. I hope these doctors have that same epiphany.
Yeah, and with it being the early 2000s when all this happened, science and technology is not as advanced as it is now. So maybe they just didn't have the tools back then to appropriately determine it. But I am glad that you did, which I think is important that you changed the names because people are so picky about names now. But I think when people read your book, it's a good thing to say and call out their name, even if it's a fake name, be able to kind of get your final word out and show like, well, this is what they've done. This is how it's affected my family. This is how it's affected my son. And being able to get a lot of that anger out really has helped. Um, how has your growth as a skier and adventurer been important to Ryan?
My growth as a skier. So I think that's a good question too. I think for him, it's interesting when you see your father struggle. And so he was way better than me, like I said. But then I got to be a pretty competent resort skier, which means, you go to a ski resort, there's a ski lift that takes you up and down.
Mm,
And but then he got bored of resort skiing and he started to ski in the backcountry. Now in the backcountry, you just show up at a mountain where there is no ski lift and you have to climb the mountain yourself and then ski down. And at the time when he started to do that, I was 10 years ago, I was probably 20 pounds heavier. I was not in great shape. I was kind of a typical dad. And it was hard. I mean, like going up the mountain is grueling. It takes hours and hours and hours. And then you ski down for like 2 minutes. So I would say, this is dumb. Why are we doing this? Why don't we just go to a ski resort? We could ski all day. But for him, there was as much enjoyment in going up the mountain as there was going down. I never felt that way. So I had to learn to do that. And we got to go to some really great places. We've been to Antarctica twice skiing on skiing expeditions. And Antarctica is the most beautiful place I've ever seen. It's stunning. It's quiet. There's no people. There's penguins and there's a couple other seals and killer whales. I mean, there's really nothing else down there. It's really a special place. And to go there and climb up the mountain and ski down is a gift. I mean, it's not many people will ever experience that. And to complain the whole way up, which is what I did the first time we went, because it was hard, it's not just it's physically hard, but it's not that hard. It's mostly mental, right? It's just making yourself take another step. And so I think he saw me get better at that and accept and learn to love, that part of it, that the beauty and the sort of challenge of going up is something. It's part of it. It's not just you take the chairlift up or you take the helicopter up and you're really only there for the going down part. That the going up part is part of it. And so I've changed a lot, I think, as a result of that. I think I'm a little more at peace with myself, and I think he's probably watched that. I also laugh because Ryan, after he got off all medicines, he got very health conscious, and he would only eat right and drink water and yoga and exercise and meditation and all these stuff and everything I used to laugh at that he did. Like I'd watch how it helped him and or how much better shape he was getting in or how good he looked and then I started doing it. So I think he's probably gotten a kick out of the fact that he's taught his dad how to live better and be happier and be healthier and hopefully live longer life. So I think it's been a good experience for him.
I know you mentioned earlier a little bit about what he's doing now, but how is Ryan doing now as an adult, and especially during a time where our world's changing? How's he doing?
So he's doing great. So he did by his junior year of high school, after three therapeutic schools and fighting the town to let him back into public school. They finally let him back in for his junior year, and they thought he was going to be there for like a day, I'm sure. But I knew once he was in a place where they couldn't restrain him and they couldn't use any of these isolation methods, and they would just treat him like a regular kid, that he would be fine. So he did great. He graduated in 2 years. Um, he got into a college in Vermont, and it was an outdoor education program. So it specialized in teaching people how to work in the industry, the outdoor industry, which was a great fit for him. And he went, I'm trying to think of the years. He was there a couple of years, and then COVID hit. And unfortunately, you know, to have that kind of program on Zoom, it just doesn't work.
Hmm.
So he had a tough sledding through COVID, but he did graduate. It took him 5 years instead of four. He did finish. And then again, the degree didn't matter, but I think he wanted to finish what he started, which I thought was good. He did get his diploma, and now that enabled him. He's pursuing both ski guiding and rock guiding, and he's pretty far along in the rock guiding. Rock guiding track's a little shorter, so he's a professional rock climbing guide. He's still got some hoops to jump through to get to be a fully licensed guide, but he's able to take people up certain cliffs and aspects of the mountain. And skiing, he's getting there in skiing. He's got more to do there. But he's making, I wouldn't say a great living, but he's making a living. He's very prolific on YouTube. He chronicles a lot of this stuff, and he's got a pretty good following on YouTube, especially the skiing side. We just completed a documentary that was loosely based on the book, but it really was about Ryan's life now. One of the things he dedicated himself to doing up in New Hampshire, there's a mountain range called the Presidential Range. All the mountains are named after presidents. Mount Washington is the biggest mountain in New England, and there's a lot of skiing in the back side of that and the front side of that. And then there's a series of trails, in the other presidential mountains. There was a book that came out that chronicled all 91 of the skiable routes, and nobody had ever done all 91. And it's really hard because some of them only form certain winters, and some days you'd get out there and there's too much avalanche risk or it's too icy. So a lot has to go right to be able to ski these. And Ryan dedicated himself to skiing all 91. And so he was the first person, that we can figure that's ever done it. And this documentary film crew wanted to film sort of the last couple of runs. And so we made that part of a documentary that was, based on what he went through to get to where he is today, and the reasons that probably why he wanted to do a project like that, like what's fueling him. So yeah, we're gonna submit it to some film festivals starting soon. We're about to finish it, like today or tomorrow. It's pretty close to being done. And I've seen, the rough cut, and it's really, really good. I mean, Ryan's great on camera, and he's just an interesting guy, and he's very open. He tells you everything. He speaks right from the heart. And the skiing stuff, we had drones, and we had like real camera crews up there, so the skiing footage is really, really good. And even if you're not a skier, you'll appreciate sort of what you have to do to just get to the place where you're going to ski. It's an adventure just to get there. So that's called 91 for the 91 runs, and that'll be, hopefully, we'll submit to Sundance and some of these big film festivals. I don't know if we'll get in all of those, but we'll get in a few, I think, and I think people will like it. So he's pretty prolific, as a skier, as a rock climber, and as a I don't know, social media, I don't know, I wouldn't call him an influencer yet, but I like to think his story has influenced people, and the book has done pretty well, and we've heard from a lot of parents, and I think that for him was a good experience, to hear from a parent or hear from a kid who struggled, and to say they read the book, and if Ryan can do it, they can do it, and just to get a little bit of a hope from his story has been a unique experience. But it's hard at times too. I think he has to live with a lot of what happened, and it becomes a permanent part of your identity. And I think there are days when he wishes he could just walk away from it and just be Ryan, and not have to carry that with him. But I think that burden is worth it, because I do think that we're going to benefit, and he's going to benefit, some other people, especially kids.
Yeah, absolutely. He has such a inspirational story. It doesn't surprise me that so many people have reached out and have connected with his story so much. I'm trying to think. I feel like his documentary would be good on Disney Plus.
Yeah, no, we've talked about that. So it's funny. The one of the executive producers has some history with Disney and ESPN, and in the documentary, I have a colorful vocabulary, and I'm from Boston, so I say the F word a lot. And Ryan says it a couple times, and he wanted to edit those out. And it's kind of hard because it was us in the raw, right? I mean, this is kind of how we are. And and I didn't want to cut those out, but he was saying we couldn't, Disney won't buy it if the F words are in there. So we're having this debate still as we speak as to whether or not to edit those out. But I think it is like a Disney type story, because it's a real underdog story. It's a kid who was given up, for dead by the system, and we were. I remember back in the day, like being told, to start looking at group homes, and this is where he'll be for the rest of his life, and he'll get benefits from the state, and he'll be a permanent ward of the state, and it's like he's literally the opposite of those things. He's about as independent and as free as a person can be. And he doesn't require much. He lives in a van. He doesn't, he's not, he doesn't even have a shower in the van. He finds places to shower and go to the bathroom. He's like a wild animal out there, but he's happy. So that's what makes me happy.
Disney, I think y'all can make an exception for this.
Yeah,
If
right. You think? I mean, we'll bleep them if we have to,
if
and there's only about two,
Deadpool,
4 or 5 of them.
I swear, what's I think? I think Deadpool's like on Disney too. Maybe. I don't know. If that's allowed on there, then
Right? Yeah,
that can be on
exactly.
there.
Yeah, there's none of that in ours. It's definitely pretty
Well,
tame compared to that.
Hulu or Netflix probably could pick it
That's
up.
that'd be fine by me. It'd be great if we could, more people to see it, the better, because I think it is a really cool story, and you get an appreciation for, what goes on in some, this mountain cultures that, New Hampshire is one of these like kind of hard scrabble cultures, and there's a whole, world of people out there who, like before work will go hike 3 hours up a mountain, ski down for 20 minutes, and then get in the car and go to work. Like, I mean,
Mhm.
they're just and the weather up there is brutal, and the wind can be terrible, the cold, and it's dangerous, but it's just part of the culture. So I think it would be cool for people to see that and appreciate it.
Kind of to wrap things up, I wanted to talk to you about the book, which is called Without Restraint. Can you just give a brief summary about what Without Restraint is, and what readers and people that haven't heard of it and want to read it can expect from it?
Yeah. So I mean, it certainly chronicles Ryan's story from, from birth to high school. I think the best thing we did, and this was, kind of an idea that we toyed with, and then it really worked. Ryan and I were our co-writers, but we wrote separately. So my version, I'm more of the narrator, I'd say, of the story, and I'm probably 2/3 of the book, because I lay the story out. But Ryan, in his own words, wrote everything, and he's got this, photographic memory. So he was able to write in really vivid detail things that happened to him in kindergarten, second grade, first grade. Like I said, he's encyclopedic with his knowledge of the different ski terrain that we did and when we did it and what the weather was like in, March of 2010 or whatever. I mean, he's very descriptive. But I didn't edit his portion. I just let him be. And he wrote most of it when he was in high school. I mean, and so I would just give him a list of things to write about and he would write, and I would put it in the book. So you really get his version. And it was tough for me to read because, when he would recount some of these things that, went on in his life and places he went and things doctors said or things that happened in school that I didn't know. I had to relive it all over again. It really was hard, but I think it's the best part of the book is that it's both of our versions. There's an audiobook version if you don't like reading it. I'm a big audiobook guy. That's good. There's two different voices for us, so you can tell when it's my portion and his portion, which I think is effective. And it's a pretty honest, or it's a very honest, look at parenting. I'm very critical of myself and everything and every mistake I made and open and I think I think people come away, respecting that, and trying not to blame others. I mean, at the end of the day, these decisions were made by me and my wife, and we've had to live with them. And luckily, Ryan doesn't have any resentment. He's I don't know why. I mean, if it was me, I'd be on the couch every day telling my therapist how my dad and my mom ruined my life. But he's the opposite of that. He's just not that kid. And so I think it was cathartic for both of us. I think to just relive it again and work through it and I think it's a good account. It's a good read. It's quick. It's not, you don't get bogged down and you won't get bogged down in the skiing. I think people look, a publisher was an outdoorsy type publisher. So if you look at the cover, it's, it's Ryan in Antarctica. And I think it might come across as this book of outdoor adventure, but it's really a parenting story. It's the skiing, I don't want to call it a metaphor, but it was our thing, but you could apply it to anything else. I mean, really. So give it a chance. I think you'll like it.
Um, the last question I end on is, what advice would you give to parents that have a kid that's struggling with something similar, or they have a child that is struggling with similar symptoms?
Definitely. I mean, first, and I think I said it, is to trust your instincts. You know your child better than anybody. If something doesn't feel right, you don't have to do it. The second thing I would say is to be patient. I mean, a lot of times, especially with your first kid, and you're in a neighborhood like ours, if your kid doesn't crawl when the other kids crawl, or your kid doesn't walk when the other kids walk, or and there's something must be wrong. I mean, we have to fix this, and a lot of this stuff they will outgrow. I mean, even the emotional stuff and the immaturity or the stuff that maybe they're just not capable of doing at 5 years old, they'll be great at 7 years old. And, let them surprise you, give them a chance, I think, to develop before you start all of these interventions, because all of these interventions have an impact. If your kid has an aide at school or is taken to a special room or is, God forbid, restrained or medicated, those things are going to have an impact. And before you let that happen, be 100% sure you need it because, not all of these kids are superstars in every single aspect of life, in the beginning. There are late bloomers. There are kids who are, where it depends where they are in the birth order. Maybe they're just quiet, or maybe they're just, they're acting out for other reasons. But I think a lot of times we just, you look at this kid and think, all right, if this doesn't happen at age 4, there's no way he's going to go to Harvard. And then what will happen? It's like, does it really matter? I mean, if they're happy, make that your priority. When you have a kid that struggles and you get to a point, and I got to this point where I just wanted Ryan to be happy for 5 minutes. And it changed how I parented him. And then it also changed how I parented my daughter because all of that stuff I was pouring on them to do better than I did because I did better than my father. And you're going to have to, make more money than I made. And, you know, you can't will that to happen. You can try to be the best parent you can be, but at the end of the day, they're going to be who they are and give them a chance to be who they are.
Well, Robert, I appreciate you so much for joining me and sharing your story. I hope my listeners have learn something, and hopefully, if there's a parent out there that's listening to my show that has a kid that's dealing with similar issues, that they've learned some advice and have been given some really good insights. For people that would like to follow you and learn more about Ryan's story and just kind of keep updates, feel free to promote everything that you have going on. Just feel free
Sure.
to promote everything.
Thank you. So I mean, for parents that have like questions about that kind of stuff, I'm easy to find on social media. Robert DeLana, DELENA, Facebook, Instagram. There's a book website. I mean, there's any number of ways. If you Google me, you'll find something, and you'll be able to reach out to me directly. And I answer everything as long as I see the email. I promise I'll answer. Ryan's a better follow if you just want to kind of keep track of him. Ryan on YouTube is Ryan DeLena, DELENA. He's extreme underscore Ryan underscore DeLena on Instagram. That's a pretty good place to see him as well. But he's someone you want to keep some tabs on because his life is very interesting, much more interesting than mine. He's always doing something cool, and life is full of adventure. When the documentary comes out, we'll obviously have places to see and find that. And to buy the book, the book's available everywhere, Amazon, and the audiobook's on Audible. It's a pretty easy find. If you want a signed copy, if you reach out to me directly, I'll send you that as well. I'm happy to. I want more people. I want people to read it. It's not a. If anyone who's ever written a book will tell you, you're not. It's not a money-making venture. Trust me. It's about getting the message out there and having people learn to appreciate and love, your story. And that's the most important thing.
Well, as I always do with all my guests, I'll put off his links in the description below so that they're all in one place for you to find. That's easy access for all my listeners. You can follow me on Instagram and TikTok at Lethal Venom Podcast, my Facebook, X, and YouTube. It's Noah's Podcast. And as always, you can listen to Lethal Venom wherever you get your podcasts from. It's available on Spotify, Apple, Amazon, iHeartRadio, YouTube, Pandora. I mean, it's everywhere. It's wherever you get your podcasts. I wanted to give one last thank you to Robert for joining me today. Did you have any closing thoughts or any last messages you want my listeners to know?
No, I wish everybody the best. If you ever want to try skiing or rock climbing, if you reach out to me or Ryan will be happy to teach you both. And both are worthwhile. It's good to get outside your comfort zone and challenge yourself.
Well, thank you, Robert, so much for joining me, and thank you to my listeners for tuning in today and hearing Robert's story, and as well as learning some more facts about people that have this disorder and people that similar children that struggle from it. I hope y'all learned something. Y'all have a great rest of your day, and I'll catch you on the next episode of Lethal Venom.